So before I start, I'm actually 5 months pregnant, so I might be getting up, sitting down, breathing heavy. I promise I'm okay. Just very uncomfortable. So I just want to thank Evan and thank Choose 954, thank CreativeZen for putting on these events. Like Chloe said, I was born and raised here. I went to high school here. I went to college at Florida State, and I moved to Australia. I lived in Asia and Central America, and it's crazy that I'm right back within 5 minutes of my childhood home. So it really feels like a full circle moment. And for me, from when I left from college to now, it is amazing to see the work that's been done in the creative space, in the wellness space, how South Florida has really grown into a place that you really want to live, you want to be a part of, you want to be a part of this community. And from being here from when I was born to now, it's an amazing shift, especially in Pompano. If you guys know the Pompano area from way back when, I'm like, wow, this place is really nice now. So it's really nice to be a part of that community and to be able to continue to grow that with Chloe and with various community members. So thank you all for coming here. So Evan asked me to share my story, and when I was looking back at all the different life experiences I have, I was like, well, I've had a lot of random life experiences. I feel like I've lived like 10 different people's lives in one, and I was trying to find where the common thread was. And for me, what's really come through is the common thread lies in the story of listening to my intuition and then taking the action to take that leap or take that risk. And some of my biggest life pivots that I never thought or never dreamed was possible for myself happened when I had that gut instinct. I was able to find the stillness within to listen and then take the action to get to where I needed to go in terms of taking that leap and trusting myself that I would be okay. So that's really where a lot of these stories will come from, different times where I listened and it went great, different times where I actively chose not to listen and had literal and figurative earthquakes enter into my life. And yeah, it's really just a matter of developing that relationship. So that's kind of the theme of where today will go. And at the end of the practice, we will just go into a little 5-minute breath work and meditation practice to cultivate that relationship with your intuition. You might like to call intuition your inner voice, your gut instinct, or your relationship with a higher power speaking to you, whatever that is for you. I think we've all had maybe various glimpses of what that looks like. So yeah, that's kind of where today's going. I'd like to step back all the way to my first experience with yoga. It was about 15 years ago. I was in high school, and I was a competitive swimmer for almost 10 years, and there's only so many times a human can rotate their arm over and over again before it gives out on you. And I ended up developing tendinitis at the age of 15. And at the time, Bikram yoga was just starting to take hold in the West. That was really like the first kind of yoga that was hitting mainstream, Western culture. And my coach was like, hey, I heard about this like stretching in a sauna. I feel like it'll be great for you, for your shoulder. And I was like, okay, I'll go. Nothing about spirituality, nothing about meditation. And I went and I loved it. I fell in love because of the heat, the competition, how far can I push my body today being a 15-year-old athlete. That was like my jam. And we got to the end of the class and we were laying in Shavasana. And anyone who's had a Bikram class or a hot yoga class knows that first Shavasana when the doors open and your sweat's dripping down you. It's like a real spiritual experience. And I grew up in Catholic schooling my whole life. I knew of the concept of God and prayer, but that was the first time in my life that I had a real lived experience of a conversation with God, and now I look back as a conversation with my higher self, a conversation with my intuition. And I remember in that moment thinking, I'm gonna do this forever. I'm gonna be a teacher. I'm gonna own a studio. All the things, I can do what that teacher just did. I know that. I'm gonna do this for the rest of my life. And that was the first time that I really had this voice come to me in a really powerful, not aggressive, but powerful, strong, reassuring voice that I now know is my intuition that I've carried with me through the rest of my life. And of course, as time goes, you're in high school, where are you gonna go to school? What's your major? Blah, 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 all the things, and you wanna make your parents happy, follow the path that's laid for you that society has said, you do X, you do Y, you do Z, equals a happy life. And so I kind of, throughout my high school and through college, was following this dichotomy of two different people of continuing to practice yoga, continuing to deepen my relationship with my inner voice, with my intuition, and then at the same time partying my ass off, having a lot of fun and and following the route of going into the marketing world and the business world. And really, I always said to people growing up, I could be the CMO of a huge company, or I could live in a shack and teach yoga on the beach. I was like, which person do I want to be? And that was the question that I carried with me pretty much my entire life. And you'll see how my random experiences of life have taken me from that marketing route to the beach shack yoga route. And so that's really kind of the start of where I was like trying to ask those deeper questions for myself. Who do I want to be? What kind of life do I want to live? And a lot of times it's not about the specific decision that you make. It's about following that intention of your life and being open to the pivots that life brings you. So I had an opportunity in college to study abroad, and I was very grateful to take that. And I met my friend Matt. And after studying abroad, we were sitting in Tallahassee at a bar, of course, and he's like, hey, I have a family wedding in Ireland, and my parents have paid for all this stuff, and my girlfriend can't come, and I want to bring a friend that I know I've traveled with before, because we studied abroad together, and who we get along with really well, and I know that my parents will like you. I was like, all right, like, the middle of the semester, I'll miss a ton of school. It makes zero sense for me to go. I don't know any of his 300 Irish family members that are going to this wedding. I had people being like, that's a little, that's crazy. It's a lot of money. Don't go. But I had this feeling like, this is a life-changing trip. Like, go, let's just do it. And so I went, and that pivotal decision changed the trajectory of my entire life. So I went to Ireland my first day in Dublin. We decided to go on a pub crawl, as you do in Dublin, through Temple Bar. And we walk into the first bar on the pub crawl, and I lock eyes with this man. He's wearing capris, and I was like, oh, he's either like Russian or he's Eastern European or something. Because at the time, men did not wear chinos. Men did not wear capris. This was like, when was this, 2012? So, and I was like, there's something really special about this guy. I was like that quick little, like someone catches your eye, and being 21, I was like, I'm gonna make out with him tonight at the very least. So, whatever, at the very least. And so we found out he ended up being on the same pub crawl. Within a couple minutes, he was sitting at my table. And I found out that his name was Sam. He was Australian, and that he would never, ever, ever go skydiving. So I was like, okay, bonus points for Australian, minus a couple points for not going skydiving. It'll even out eventually. We can get over it. And we spent the whole night together. Eventually, his friends wanted to go home, and I turned around to him and I said, you're not going home. Like, you're staying here. And he said, yeah, no, I'm not leaving. I'm staying. And he hasn't left since. We've been together for almost 9-10 years now. And we left the next day from Dublin onto our Ireland tour. He left to go to Switzerland. We only knew each other for 24, 48 hours. And he kept in contact, kept talking. And maybe a week later, he was like, hey, my friend I was traveling with left to go home back to Australia. I have all these rooms booked, all these flights booked. Do you want to come back for New Year's? And this, at the time, was 3 weeks later. I was already back home in America. And I was like, this is really crazy. I don't know you, like, really that well. But there was something in my heart saying, like, this is the moment. Like, this is something, like, that voice came back to me, that strong, powerful voice. Like, you'll be okay. At the very least, you get an awesome free trip. Like, let's go. And I had a lot of friends, like, this is dangerous, this is not okay, like, you shouldn't do this, don't take this risk. And really, I was very lucky to have parents who trusted my judgment and trusted my decision, who, without their support, might have been a bit harder to make that decision. But I took that leap, and I went back to Europe. We spent time together, and within 6 months, I was moving back to Australia with him. So that's how, this is kind of the theme of the whole talk, is like, knowing things might be a little crazy, having that outside perspective of everyone being like, that's not the path, that's not, quote unquote safe, that's not the certain way to go, the safety net has not been rolled out for you just yet, why are you gonna jump? But truly, some of the best things in life happen when you trust yourself, when you trust that inner voice, and you take the leap anyways, trusting that safety net will be rolled out for you. And sometimes you take that step and immediately you have the safety net, and sometimes you take that step and it can be months and you're wondering, like, did I make the right decision? And it takes a while for the dots to connect. So we lived in Australia for a little while, for about a year. I rose in the ranks from college grad in marketing to intern to coordinator. And eventually we got an opportunity to teach English in Thailand. So we said, okay, let's go to Thailand, and we traveled around a bit, had a lot of fun, still freelancing and marketing, so I was still developing a lot of those skills. Again, still playing that balance of I'm on the CMO track and I'm quite literally on a beach in Thailand teaching yoga and not quite sure where to go, but having that global perspective of yoga and meditation as a practice, really deepening my relationship with the more subtle aspects of yoga within breathwork and meditation, and getting, conversations with Buddhist monks and talking to people from, ashrams in India, and like really getting this big global perspective changed my relationship with my yoga practice. And eventually we moved back to Sydney. We said, okay, we're gonna set roots for a little bit. For us, that's like 1 or 2 years, we'll set roots. And I landed a job at a global marketing agency. And again, I rose the ranks pretty quick. I got from coordinator to manager to director. And in that industry, in the marketing, publishing, media industry in Sydney, as it is in many large cities, it's a lot of partying, a lot of drugs, a lot of like way to keep yourself going all the time. And in that culture in Australia, it is like the harder you can party, the funnier stories that you have the next day, the better. And like coming from an American corporate culture, I was like, you can't do that. Like, that's not right. But quickly, I have a very addictive personality, and that switched over very quickly to want to try to continue to please people and rise through the ranks in a way that works for them. And at the same time, doing my 200-hour yoga teacher training and deepening my practice and my relationship with myself even further. It's very difficult to have a very deep meditation practice and ignore the signs and the messages that your intuition is guiding you to do. And so I kept getting this message, like, you need to stop drinking. Like, you're not making good decisions. You're making decisions that are affecting your relationship, that are affecting your workplace. And these aren't like, massive, really, really bad things, but it was enough that was adding up over time. And the deeper and the more clear that I was getting through my yoga training, the closer that I was getting with my inner voice, the harder it was to ignore those messages. Eventually, we were having, me and my partner, at that stage, it was like 5 or 6 years, we were, having that normal relationship tension that you get over that 5, 6, 7 year hump. And he was going through his own version of addiction. I was going through my own version of addiction, while both trying to just be like, everything's fine, everything's good. Let's go back to Asia. Our problems won't follow us there. Everything will be fine. He wanted to finish his dive master certification. I wanted to teach yoga at this beautiful studio on this island in Indonesia. And we said, let's go. It'll be fine. We don't need to talk about any of this stuff that's been going on with us. Even though both of us, my husband's a very intuitive guy, we both knew there was big conversations we needed to have. We land in Bali. We're like, yes, I don't think they're there. The problems aren't there. We're good. And the first night, there's a little mini earthquake. There's a lot of earthquakes in Bali. We lived there. We knew, okay, it's fine. The next day, there was another one that we didn't even feel, which is a real big metaphor of us not listening to our intuition and just throwing pebbles at us until we hear it and us actively ignoring. And then finally, we land on Gili Air, which is a tiny, tiny little island. You can walk across it in like 30 minutes, 20-foot elevation, no 2-story houses. The tallest thing is a palm tree. And we're like, we're here. We're in paradise. And that day I get Bali belly, which is probably the worst version of gastro you could ever imagine. There's no doctor on this island. There's no antibiotics. Lasted for a few days, and I was like, I need to get on the ferry back to the main island and go to the hospital. And I was going to go that day, and something in me was like, you need to stay on this island until tomorrow. And I was like, oh, I'll go tomorrow. That night, my partner gets home from his course, and a 7.0 magnitude earthquake hits our little tiny island in the middle of the ocean. And buildings shaking, walls are falling, sewage is breaking. Locals are running around with life jackets saying, tsunami's coming, tsunami's coming. There's no cell service, so we can't check if there's a tsunami's coming. And I'm very sick. I'm very dehydrated. I can't move. We have no clothes on. We're in our pajamas. Like, it was awful. And we spent the next 2 or 3 days in sleeping and living in dirt, basically waiting to find out what the next step was, not knowing with every tremor if there was going to be a tsunami. And there was no evacuation route. There's no 3 or 4 story buildings. The plan was just grab a snorkel and a BCD and fill it up with air and pray, And eventually the military came, evacuated us, and we got out. But for both of us, we were obviously very shaken up, literally and figuratively. And it took a little while for us to get to a place where we could talk. But we both understood that we were hiding from something for a really long time. And in the wake of our trauma, because we were having different types of trauma responses, that we couldn't hide from our problems anymore. And it really opened the door for us once we were in a place where we felt safe, both in our bodies and in the location. It opened up the door for us to have really deeper conversations that we weren't having and we were chasing, and we were using different substances and different ways of, addiction to avoid. And honestly, from that point forward, from a relationship point of view, we've been on a upward scale of, like an upward trajectory ever since then. And thousands of people dealt with that earthquake. Not every single person was dealing with what we were going through. And I don't believe that like a massive tragedy like that, hundreds and hundreds of people losing their lives, was just so Sam and I could have a deeper conversation. But it was something that it was like, I avoided my intuition for so long. It tried to throw me a couple pebbles. It tried to throw me some bigger rocks. And then eventually it threw a boulder until it knocked us down. And for many of us, whether it's our own selves or we know of someone, they're avoiding something with their health perhaps. And it's like, okay, you have a cough and then you get the flu and then the universe throws something a little bit bigger. And then finally it's a diagnosis that shatters your entire world. And it's a matter of us just taking a step back, and instead of getting to the boulder, instead of it getting to the 7.0 earthquake, it's actually listening to those little tremors of that inner voice. It's listening to those little rocks, those little pebbles that are getting thrown at us. So we continue on with our travels. And eventually we make it back to the USA. We were waiting for his green card to arrive, and we can move back to the USA. And we're trying to figure out what our next move was. Do we have a baby? What do we do? And I was kind of like pushing it away. Like, I had a yoga retreat planned in Costa Rica that I was hosting. And I didn't want to be, pregnant or have a baby during that, because I was like, that's really uncertain. I don't know how I'm going to be. I don't know what's going to happen. And I went away to a different yoga training for a little bit, and I came back that night, and again, I got woken up in the middle of the night with this loud, powerful voice saying, now, like, you're ready for a baby now. And I had suffered with endometriosis, menstrual conditions, reproductive conditions my whole life, and within a month, I had gotten pregnant. And it's not I know that that's not the case for so many women, because I work with so many women, unfortunately, with fertility challenges. But again, it was that matter of listening to that voice and trusting. And I got pregnant, and I was very sick. And up until the week of my Costa Rica retreat, I was throwing up every day. And then I got to Costa Rica, and it went away. And again, that was just me being so worried about something that could have happened, instead of just trusting that, like, it will be okay. Like, you have the support from the universe, from your retreat facilitator, everyone. Throughout all this, still working in marketing and yoga. Marketing and yoga was kind of my side hustle. Yoga was like my passion. I had my child, Layla. She's amazing. She's a little fireball. And I suffered through PPD, postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, postpartum rage, all the acronyms you can think of I had under my belt. And yeah, it was a really hard time, like trying to figure out like what was up, what was down, like I just didn't know what was going to give me the strength that I needed. And I wasn't sitting in the silence that I needed. I wasn't sitting in the stillness that I was typically, as a new mom, you don't have the time to sit and do your 20-minute meditation practice. So those strings, the intuition was still there, but it was more of a whisper as opposed to that loud voice. And anyone that's pulled themselves out of a really dark place or is continuing to pull themselves out of a dark place knows you don't trust the voices that are in your head. It's hard to differentiate between the inner critic and your intuition. So I ended up working with my therapist who helped me through my PTSD with my earthquake. And we went through a set of practices, a set of techniques, and then she had me sit down and ask, what do you need now? That's it. What do you need right now? Like Chloe asked this morning, what do I need today? And the two words that came right away were stillness and silence. Things that don't happen often for a new mom. But it was really powerful for me to just like right away, those were the two words. And of course there were other things like I need sleep, I need food, but like those were the two words that resonated within my soul that were like my gut feeling. And so we worked on that. We worked on ways so that I could incorporate a little bit more time for myself, a little bit more time maybe away from the baby. Maybe my mom can watch her so I can just sit and have some space, some silence. And so, yeah, I mean, it's honestly, obviously you can see there's been a lot of back and forth. Do I work in marketing? Do I stay in yoga? What happens? And the guiding force in my life has been this intuition. The last little bit that I'll just share is once I felt a little bit better mentally after my child, I decided to go into my own different version of addiction. Because during this, I'll go back a little bit, after the earthquake, I also stopped drinking. That was one of the big things pulling me. So I really took a big break from all of that. And I have a vastly different relationship with alcohol now, which I'm so grateful for. And so I went into a different version of addiction after my daughter was born, which was overworking. And I was like, well, I'm just going to show my value and my contribution to society by working in my marketing role at my job here in Florida. I'm going to run my yoga business. I was looking into opening a studio. I'm going to work in I was just all over the place. I'm training for a triathlon. And eventually my body was like, we're done here. Like, you are not going to do this anymore. And my body shut down. I had like gastro flu, like it wasn't COVID, I swear. Like everything that could go wrong in a 48-hour period. Like I was vomiting, I had fever, I had cold sweats, I had body aches. And I went to the hospital eventually and they did all the tests and they're like, nothing is like physically showing up for you. And I remember laying in the hospital being like, okay, I have not been listening to myself this whole time. Every time I'd go for a long run, every time that I'd say yes to another work commitment, there was a voice in my head saying, this is too much, this is too much, this is too much. Until I was laying in that hospital bed looking up at the ceiling, and I got an email from my real estate agent for the lease that I was about to sign for a studio saying, somebody else is interested and is going to sign today, or can you come in and sign because we want you here. And I'm laying in the hospital bed hooked up to different IVs and all this different stuff. And I was like, no, I can't. And that was the voice coming through, like, now is not the time. And just because that voice when I was 15 told me in my first Shavasana, you're going to do this for the rest of your life, you're going to open up a studio. I think part of the biggest lesson that I've learned with listening to my inner voice, listening to my intuition, is that the end destination isn't important. The message that you hear 10 years ago, you need to be able to flow and surrender with that, just the way that you flow and change from when you grow and from when you rise up. You need to be able to flow with, just keep the intention there, keep the vision there, but be okay to the change. And when I got that through and I was sitting there in the hospital, I just wrote back to her. I was like, I'm no longer interested. I quit that, closed that door. I texted my boss and I said, I'm quitting my marketing job. I'm done. Texted that email, closed that door. And I just fully committed to taking the next little bit to slow down, pare everything back, and really reevaluate what was important to me as a yoga teacher, as a mom, as a daughter, as trying to, like, what are the things that are the most important to me? And then within a couple months, things started to really get clear to me, and a door what I like to call magically opened with Chloe, and we held a retreat together, and it went so well that we were like, we need to do this together. And so I felt like trusting my intuition to be the one to close the door, and then trusting that safety net will provide eventually. That's just another story of how the more that we can trust ourselves, the more that we can trust that although we might not have the answers in our thinking mind, we have the answers in our heart. And it might take a little while for that safety net to appear. It might take a little while to feel like we've landed, but you will. And looking back now over the past 30 years, I can see all the dots connect, and every decision that I've made, whether there was a bad decision or a good decision, or it was a great experience in my life or a really painful experience in my life, it's all led me to this moment here. So now I know that I can trust that the dots will connect for the next 30 years, and to just trust that it will get there. So yeah, I think that's all the stories that I can share. Yeah, I think it's truly like how. So like the question is like how to cultivate that intuition, how to listen to that inner voice, because it can feel a little woo-woo. It can feel a little bit like, oh, it's just out there. I don't know. And it's how can we differentiate, like I said, the inner critic versus the intuition? Because that inner critic is really, really loud, and that intuition can be a tiny whisper until we cultivate a relationship with it. And truly, it's about being able to find the stillness within your own body, finding the stillness within your own mind, and then being able to take the action. Because there's a difference between listening and like a lot of the stories that I told being like, I knew I listened to the message, but I didn't take action on it. And we don't all need earthquakes and hospitalizations to make those messages clear. And if we just listen a little bit earlier in the process, our life can flow with so much ease and grace. So for me, cultivating that relationship with intuition came from my practice of yoga. As I've spoken about, it's been a common thread through my life for the last 15 years, through meditation, time in nature, just walking barefoot in your backyard, laying in the grass in the sun, journaling. It doesn't have to be yoga and meditation. It can be something completely different for you. For my husband, it's going underwater and scuba diving. There's a sense of peace and calm for him. It's taking the time to explore that relationship with yourself so that you can explore the relationship deeper within. So yeah, and the last thing I'll just leave you with is it can be really difficult at first to start trusting yourself, to start trusting the inner voice, perhaps your relationship to your higher self, or you might like to call that God, whatever resonates the most with you. But just getting really curious and asking questions and trusting that first answer that comes to you. Eventually that whisper will turn into this powerful knowing voice that you can trust.